The first thing James felt was weight, heavy, crushing weight pressing down on his chest. His lungs burned as he tried to breathe. For a moment, he thought he was trapped under wreckage, maybe part of the ship's hull. But when he opened his eyes, what he saw froze the air in his throat. A giant creature was lying on top of him. It wasn't human. Its body was enormous, at least 10 feet tall, covered in smooth gray skin that shimmered faintly under the broken emergency lights. Muscles rippled beneath its surface like iron cables. Its long arms were braced on either side of him, claws digging slightly into the cracked floor. Its head hung low, breathing deeply, slow, rumbling breaths that sounded like distant thunder. James's heart pounded. He didn't move. Every part of him screamed danger. The thing could crush him with one hand if it wanted. He blinked through the haze of smoke and blinking lights. The air smelled like burned circuits and ozone. The shuttle, their transport ship, had crashed. He remembered fragments, alarms blaring, the sound of tearing metal, someone shouting his name. And now, this creature. He swallowed hard and whispered, "Hey, get off me!" The alien's head tilted slightly as if confused. Then its eyes opened. They glowed faintly, pale silver with hints of blue light flickering within. Those eyes locked on him, sharp and intelligent. James froze again. The alien made a low sound, something between a growl and a hum. Its massive body trembled slightly. For a second, he thought it was going to attack. But then he noticed something strange. The creature wasn't pressing down harder. Its claws weren't cutting into him. In fact, it looked afraid. James's fear slowly shifted to confusion. The alien's breathing was uneven, like it was hurt. Its massive chest rose and fell in shallow, struggling motions. Then he saw it. A dark blue liquid dripping from its side, pooling on the ground. Blood. He realized the alien wasn't pinning him in anger. It had collapsed on him because it was too weak to stand. Gathering what little courage he had left, James whispered, You're hurt." The alien blinked slowly. Its eyes flickered toward the wound, then back to him. It didn't speak, only let out a low, painful sound that echoed like a growl muffled by pain. James hesitated. He wanted to push it off, but the creature was far too heavy. If he moved wrong, it might crush him by accident. So instead, he did the only thing he could. He lay still and waited. The minutes dragged on like hours. His breath came in short bursts. Every vibration from the alien's chest felt like a drumbeat against his ribs. Finally, with a deep rumble, the creature moved. Slowly, shakily, it pushed itself up on its arms and rolled to the side. The pressure lifted. James gasped and sat up, coughing. His whole body ached, but he was alive. When he looked at the alien again, it was lying on the cold floor, chest heaving, one hand clutching its bleeding side. For a long moment, neither moved. The silence between them was thick. The silence between two survivors who should have been enemies, yet shared the same fragile breath of life. James forced himself to speak. "Can you understand me?" The alien turned its head, eyes narrowing. Then, in a deep and broken voice that made James's skin crawl and heart pound at the same time, it said one single word. "Human." James's eyes widened. The sound was rough, like the creature had never used its throat before, but the meaning was clear. It knew what he was. "Yeah," James said softly, still shaking. "That's right, human." The alien blinked again, its chest rising slower now. It looked around at the shattered remains of the ship, at the flickering lights, then back at him. Finally, it spoke again. 2 words this time, rough and strained. Crash. Cold? Then its eyes closed and it collapsed fully. James's pulse raced. He didn't know what to do. The giant alien lay there, barely breathing, wounded and weak. He could run, but where? Through the window of the broken hull, he could see white snow whipping across a frozen wasteland. The air outside looked deadly. He sat there, heart pounding, staring at the unconscious giant beside him. Fear mixed with something else, something unexpected. Pity. Whatever it was, this creature wasn't just a beast. It had spoken. It had shown fear. It had spared him when it easily could have ended him. James looked down at the alien's bleeding side and whispered quietly to himself, Guess it's not just me trying to survive. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but in that freezing wreck, one truth echoed in his heart. Survival might depend on both of them. The air inside the wrecked shuttle grew colder with every minute. The heating systems were dead, the emergency lights flickered weakly, and smoke drifted lazily through the broken vents. James sat beside the unconscious alien, staring at the silver-gray skin that shimmered faintly under the dim light. He could hear the soft hum of the wind outside, lonely and endless. He rubbed his shaking hands together, trying to think. The ship's hull had split open during impact, and through the cracks, he could see a frozen wasteland stretching into darkness. He had no idea where they had crashed. It wasn't any planet he recognized. The sky outside was gray and stormy, with faint flashes of lightning across thick clouds. James checked the emergency console. No signal, no power, nothing but static. They were completely stranded. He looked back at the alien again. It was still breathing, though weakly. The dark blue blood around its wound had started to freeze. James hesitated, but finally reached for his small med kit. "All right, big guy," he muttered. "I'm not sure if this will help, but it's all I've got." He tore open a sealant pack and pressed it gently against the alien's side. The skin was hot, almost burning to the touch. The creature twitched slightly, but didn't wake. The sealant reacted with the blood, hissing softly as it closed the wound. James sat back, breathing hard. "There," he whispered. "At least you won't bleed out." Minutes passed like hours. He tried to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled at his eyelids. Every sound made him jump. The creak of metal, the groan of wind. The memory of the crash still echoed in his mind. He remembered the moment it happened. They had been halfway through orbit around a neutral moon when debris struck their engines. The explosion ripped through the cargo hold. He'd seen crew members, both human and alien, thrown into the air. The alarms had screamed, the lights had gone red, and then the ship had fallen. He and this alien must have been thrown together in the chaos. That explained why it had landed on top of him. James shivered. "We should both be dead," he whispered. He checked the oxygen level, dangerously low. Without help, they wouldn't last more than a day. He thought about leaving the wreck, maybe finding shelter, but one look at the white storm outside told him he'd freeze before walking 50 steps. A low rumble broke the silence. James spun around. The alien was stirring. Its massive hand twitched, claws scraping lightly against the metal floor. Then with a low groan, it opened its glowing eyes again. The silver-blue light inside them flickered weakly. James swallowed hard. "Hey, easy. You're hurt." The alien slowly sat up, its movement slow and heavy. It looked around the wreckage, then at James. Its voice came out deep and rough, vibrating through the cold air. "Alive. Human alive, yeah," James said softly. "Still breathing." The alien's gaze wandered to the broken hull, to the snowstorm outside. "Cold," it said. "We die here," James nodded. "I know, we need to move. Find somewhere safe." The alien placed one massive hand on the floor and tried to stand. Its height filled the room, tall enough that its head nearly brushed the ceiling. James felt tiny beside it. But as soon as it tried to take a step, the alien stumbled, gripping the wall for balance. "Easy," James said quickly. "You're still weak." The alien looked down at him, chest rising with heavy breaths. Then, before James could react, it bent down and lifted him effortlessly into its arms. "Hey, what are you doing?" James shouted, startled. The alien didn't answer right away. It looked toward the open hatch and then said, "Shelter, you small, I strong." And just like that, it stepped into the storm. The cold hit like knives. James buried his face against the alien's chest, trying to block the wind. The creature moved slowly but steadily, its heavy footsteps crunching through the snow. The landscape was endless white. No trees, no sign of life, just ice and stone. James glanced up once and saw snowflakes melting against the alien's hot skin. Its breath came out in deep, visible clouds. The more he looked, the more he realized this creature wasn't his enemy. It was carrying him, protecting him. Hours passed. The storm never stopped, but finally, through the swirling white, James saw a dark shape ahead, a rocky formation, half buried in snow. The alien trudged toward it and ducked inside. It was a shallow cave, small but enough to shield them from the wind. The alien set James down gently against the wall, then collapsed beside him, chest heaving. Its deep voice came again, softer this time. Safe. For now. James stared at the giant creature beside him, the same one that had once terrified him. Now it was his only hope. He nodded slowly, whispering, "Yeah, safe for now." Outside, the storm howled on, but inside that cave 2 survivors, human and alien, shared the same fragile spark of life. The cave was dark and cold, but compared to the storm outside, it felt like safety. The wind screamed through the cracks, snow drifted across the entrance, and every breath came out in small white clouds. James sat near the wall, wrapping his arms around himself for warmth. His body trembled, and his fingers were numb. Across from him, the alien sat quietly. Even in the dim light, its massive form looked otherworldly. Its gray skin shimmered faintly, and faint lines of blue light pulsed beneath it, veins glowing softly like flowing energy. The creature looked exhausted, its chest rising and falling. Heavily, but its eyes stayed open, watching the entrance as if guarding them both. James wanted to say something, but the silence between them was heavy. 2 strangers, 2 different worlds, now trapped together by fate. Finally, he spoke. "You saved me out there." The alien didn't answer right away. It turned its head slightly, eyes glowing faintly. Then, in its deep, broken voice, it said, "You fix wound. I repay." James blinked. "You mean, because I helped you?" The alien nodded slowly. "Debt. Must protect human." There was no emotion in the way it said it, yet something about its tone made James's chest tighten. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Well," he said softly, "you've done a good job so far." The alien's head tilted as if studying him. Then it rumbled quietly, almost like a sigh. "You small, fragile, but brave." James smiled weakly. "Yeah, that's what we humans do. Small and stubborn." For a few minutes, they sat in silence again. The wind outside howled like a living thing, shaking snow loose from the rocks. The alien shifted its weight and looked around. "Cold," it said. "Fire," James frowned. "I tried lighting the heater earlier. It broke in the crash, but maybe—" He opened his pack and took out a small emergency kit. Inside were a few flares and a single heating rod. The fuel was almost empty, but maybe it would last the night. He activated the rod and a faint orange glow filled the cave. The warmth spread slowly, just enough to stop his teeth from chattering. He leaned closer to it, sighing in relief. The alien watched the light with quiet fascination. Its silver eyes reflected the glow like mirrors. "Human light," it said softly. "Small, but warm." James chuckled. "Yeah. It's not much, but it keeps us alive." He looked at the alien's side again. The wound was closed, but the skin around it was dark and bruised. "Does it hurt?" he asked. The creature glanced down and shrugged its massive shoulders. "Pain is reminder." "Reminder of what?" "That I live." The simplicity of the answer hit James hard. He didn't reply for a while. Instead, he stared at the faint light, thinking of home, of Earth, of people who might never know what happened to him. He wondered if anyone was even looking. Suddenly, a strong gust blew through the cave entrance, and the light flickered. The temperature dropped again, sharp and biting. James's shivering returned, worse than before. He rubbed his hands together, but it wasn't enough. His breath came out in shaky gasps. The alien noticed. It watched him for a moment, then moved closer. "You cold," it said simply. "I'm fine," James lied, teeth chattering. The alien studied him silently, then did something unexpected. It shifted closer until its enormous body was beside him. Then, slowly, it wrapped one arm around him, pulling him close to its chest. James froze. What are you doing?" The alien's deep voice came softly. "Heat share. You freeze." Not aloud. The warmth from its body was immediate, strong and steady like a living furnace. The smell of its skin was strange but not unpleasant, something like rain and metal. James felt his heartbeat slow, his body relaxing against the creature's warmth. He whispered, half smiling, "You're like a walking heater." The alien made a low sound that almost resembled laughter. "Human small, easy to warm." For a long time they stayed like that, the storm raging outside, two lives pressed together by survival. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful. As James drifted closer to sleep, he heard the alien's deep breathing beside him, steady and calm. For the first time since the crash, he didn't feel alone. Before closing his eyes, he whispered softly, "Thanks, big guy." The alien didn't answer, but its arm tightened just slightly around him, protective and firm. Outside, the storm screamed against the rocks, but inside that cold cave, a strange kind of warmth grew, not just from body heat, but from something far rarer. A fragile trust between two beings who should never have met, yet somehow needed each other more than anything. The next morning came without light. The sky outside was still covered in thick gray clouds, and snow continued to fall endlessly. The world beyond the cave looked frozen in silence, a white desert of death. James slowly opened his eyes. He was still wrapped in warmth. The alien's huge arm lay protectively over him. Its slow, steady breathing filled the small cave, like the soft rhythm of a giant heartbeat. For a moment, he just lay there, feeling strangely safe. Then carefully, he shifted and sat up. The alien's eyes opened almost instantly. Silver light flickered within them as it focused on him. "You wake," it said in its deep, calm voice. "Yeah," James said softly, rubbing his cold hands together. "Still alive somehow." The alien blinked slowly, then looked toward the cave entrance. Snow was piled high outside, and the wind's howl echoed faintly through the rocks. "Storm still strong," it said. "We wait." James nodded. Waiting was all they could do. Their food packs were almost empty, and the oxygen meter on his wrist showed a slow decline. He had to think of something, some way to contact rescue. But right now, even breathing felt like a struggle. After a long silence, James finally spoke. "What's your name? I can't just keep calling you big guy." The alien tilted its head as if confused by the question. Then it said slowly, "Tiral." "Tiral," James repeated, the name heavy on his tongue. "All right, Tiral, I'm James." The alien studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "James?" It repeated softly, almost testing the sound. A small smile touched James's lips. "That's right." The storm outside grew louder, the wind screaming against the rocks. The heating rod had burned out hours ago, and the cold began to creep back into their bones. James rubbed his arms, but the shaking wouldn't stop. His body wasn't built for this kind of cold, Tiral noticed. "You cold again," it said. "I'm fine," James muttered, though his lips were turning blue. The alien moved closer. "No lie," it said firmly. Then, without asking, it shifted beside him again and wrapped its enormous arms around him, pulling him close. James gasped softly, then relaxed. The warmth returned almost instantly, spreading off his frozen limbs. He leaned against the alien's chest, feeling the slow beat of its heart under the thick skin. It was strong, deep, and comforting. They sat like that for a long time. The storm raged, but inside there was peace. Two beings from different worlds, breathing the same cold air, sharing the same warmth. After a while, James whispered, back on your ship. Before the crash. Why were you there? Were you on a mission? Taral's eyes flickered. Yes, it said slowly. I was protector. My people guard transport. You were passenger? So you were one of the soldiers? Yes, I was told to protect cargo, not humans. James looked up at him. Then why save me? The alien was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. When ship fell, I saw you try to save others. You push another before explosion. You did not run. You help my people. Do not understand that? James's breath caught. He hadn't thought anyone had seen that moment, when he'd shoved a crewmate toward the escape pod seconds before the hull had torn apart. You saw that? Taral nodded slowly. You risk for others. That is strange, but brave. I could not let you die. James felt something tighten in his chest. There was no pride in Taral's voice, only quiet honesty. He smiled faintly. You know, for a 10-foot-tall alien, you're not half bad. Taral blinked, confused. Half bad? It means you're good, James said with a chuckle. The alien made a low, rumbling sound that almost sounded like laughter. The sound filled the cave deep and warm. For the first time since the crash, James laughed too. When the laughter faded, silence returned. But it wasn't heavy this time. It felt peaceful, even friendly. Hours passed like that. Small talk, shared warmth, and quiet understanding. Two survivors learning each other's ways little by little. At one point, James dozed off against Taral's chest, half asleep, whispering, You know, Taral, maybe humans and your people aren't so different after all. Taral looked down at him, his glowing eyes softening. Maybe not, he said quietly. We both want to live. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. The howling wind turned to soft snow, and the light of a distant sun broke faintly through the clouds. Inside the cave, a strange friendship had taken root, one born not from peace or alliance, but from something far stronger, survival, trust, and the first spark of understanding between two worlds that had always feared each other. The storm had finally stopped. When James stepped outside the cave, the world looked quiet, almost peaceful. The sky had cleared, revealing a pale sun hanging low behind thin clouds. The light touched the frozen land, making it shine like silver glass. For the first time since the crash, James felt hope. He looked back at Taral, who was standing at the cave entrance, his huge form casting a long shadow across the snow. The alien's glowing eyes scanned the horizon carefully, ever alert. Even after days of pain and cold, his presence still looked strong, powerful yet calm. James turned to him with a tired smile. Looks like the storm's finally over. Maybe we can find a better shelter, or at least see where we are. Taral nodded slowly. Yes, but must move careful. Cold still kills. They packed what little supplies they had, a half-empty food pack, the broken beacon pieces, and the last oxygen cell. Then, side by side, they started walking through the snow. Their footprints left two distinct trails, one small, one large, winding across the white wasteland. Hours passed. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was quiet understanding. James found himself talking just to keep his mind sharp. You know, back on Earth, people would never believe this, he said, smiling faintly. A human and a 10-foot alien walking together through a frozen wasteland. Taral turned his head slightly. Do humans tell stories? James chuckled softly. All the time. About heroes, explorers, and strange new friends. The alien seemed to think about that. Then he said, Maybe one day they tell story of human and Velra warrior. James laughed. Only if we live long enough to tell it ourselves. They reached a ridge overlooking a frozen valley. From there, they could see the wrecked shuttle far below, just a small shape half buried in ice. Smoke no longer rose from it. Everything was silent. James sighed heavily. No rescue signal. I checked the beacon again. The transmitter's dead. Without power cells, it's useless. Taral looked at him quietly. Then we build new one. James stared at him. You really think we can do that? Out here? The alien nodded. You fix wounds. You fix ship. You fix beacon." His tone carried simple certainty, as if failure didn't exist in his world. James smiled faintly. "You have more faith in me than I do." They set up camp again in a smaller cave that overlooked the valley. The night came early and the temperature dropped fast. They built a small fire from scraps of wiring and debris. The orange light flickered across the alien's face, making his silver eyes gleam softly. James sat beside the flames, his hands stretched toward the heat. "Hey, Taral," he said after a while. "Can I ask you something?" The alien looked down at him. "Ask. When we crashed? When you woke up on top of me? What were you thinking? You could have hurt me easily." Taral was silent for a moment. The fire crackled softly between them. Then he said, "At first, I thought you enemy, human soldier. But when I saw your eyes, I knew fear, not hate. You were not my enemy. You were, like me, lost, scared." James's chest tightened. "So you decided to protect me?" The alien's voice softened, almost like a whisper. "Yes, my mission before crash was simple. Protect cargo, obey order. But when I saw you try to help others, I changed. I wanted to protect you, not because of order, but because it was right." James looked into the flames, his throat tight. "You risked your life for me, even when your people might hate that." Taral nodded slowly. "Yes, my kind do not trust humans. They say humans destroy more than they build. But I wanted to see truth myself. Now I see. You build, you care, you fight for others. That is strength." For a long moment, James couldn't speak. The warmth from the fire mixed with something warmer inside him. Gratitude, maybe even pride. He smiled faintly and said, "You know, Taral, you're starting to sound a lot like one of us." The alien tilted his head. "Like human?" "Yeah," James said, laughing softly. "That's not a bad thing." The alien's glowing eyes flickered with amusement. "Maybe human way's not so weak." James looked up at him. "And maybe Velra hearts aren't as cold as people think." The two sat quietly for a while, the firelight painting soft shadows on the cave walls. The air was cold, but neither of them felt alone anymore. For the first time since the crash, James realized something. He didn't just want to survive. He wanted both of them to make it home. Outside, the stars began to appear. Tiny lights scattered across the frozen sky. And beneath those distant stars, a human and an alien sat side by side, not as enemies, but as friends bound by survival and the start of something far greater. The next morning came with a strange calm. The wind had died and the sky was clearer than ever. James stepped outside the cave and looked up. The horizon glowed pink and gold. It was the most beautiful thing he had seen since the crash. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing the icy air, feeling alive. Behind him, Taral emerged slowly, his heavy steps crunching in the snow. His armor, scratched and cracked, still carried faint blue lights that pulsed with his heartbeat. He looked tired but strong, his tall form blocking the light like a mountain. James turned toward him with a determined smile. "We can't just wait anymore," he said. "We need to build that transmitter. Someone out there has to hear us." Taral nodded. "We build. Together." They gathered the broken beacon, pieces of metal, and the last working power cell. James used his gloves to protect his hands from the freezing metal. Every few minutes he stopped to catch his breath. The thin air made his lungs burn. Taral watched him closely, silently making sure he didn't collapse again. Hours passed as they worked. James connected wires, adjusted circuits, and tried to make the signal generator respond. Sparks flew once, burning his glove, but he didn't stop. Taral held parts steady with his large hands, careful not to crush anything. For such a huge being, his touch was surprisingly gentle. At last, the machine gave a weak beep. A small green light flickered on. James froze, hardly believing it. "It's working, at least a little," he whispered. Taral tilted his head. "Signal strong enough?" "Not yet," James replied, frustration filling his voice. "We need more power. Just one more cell or it won't reach orbit." The alien was silent for a long moment. Then he looked down at his chest plate. A glowing blue crystal pulsed there, the energy core of his armor. "Take mine," Taral said simply. James turned sharply. No, that's your life support. You'll freeze without it. The alien's deep voice was calm. You freeze too if no rescue comes. One of us must survive. If signal reaches your people, maybe they find you. James felt his throat tighten. You can't just give up like that. Taral looked at him, his glowing eyes filled with quiet strength. I do not give up, I choose. My people taught me that purpose is greater than self. My purpose now is you. For a long moment, James couldn't speak. His eyes stung with tears he didn't want to show. Damn it, Taral. You're the reason I'm still alive. You think I'm just gonna let you die for me? The alien reached up, removing the glowing core from his armor. The light flickered weaker as he held it out. You are not weak, James. You carry hope. That is power greater than mine. James's hands shook as he took the core. It was warm, pulsing like a living heart. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. Fine, but if we get rescued, I'm making sure you come with me. You hear me? Taral's lips curved slightly, the closest thing to a smile his alien face could make. Then build fast, human. Together, they connected the alien core to the beacon. The machine whined, then lit up with a steady glow. The signal strength rose, weak, then stronger. James adjusted the transmitter angle and hit send. A long hum filled the air. Then the beacon began pulsing, sending out a steady pattern of human distress code mixed with alien frequency. A signal no one could ignore. James fell to his knees in relief, breathing hard. It's done. It's really done. But when he looked back, his heart dropped. Taral was on one knee, his breath misting weakly in the air. His armor lights had gone dark. Hey, stay with me! James shouted, rushing to him. You're gonna be fine. Just hang on, big guy. Taral's deep voice was faint. Is signal working? James nodded quickly, tears forming in his eyes. Yes, it's working. You did it! The alien's eyes dimmed slightly, but he smiled again. Good, then. My choice was right. James grabbed his arm tightly. No, you're not dying, you hear me? You're not leaving me here alone. Taral's head tilted down, his massive hand gently resting on James's shoulder. Not alone. Never alone, the human's voice broke.
Please.
But Taral's eyes closed. The light in his armor faded completely. The cave fell silent except for the faint rhythmic pulse of the beacon, calling into the stars. James sat there, holding the alien's cold hand, tears freezing on his cheeks. Above them, the signal climbed through the frozen sky, crossing the void between worlds. For the first time, James didn't feel small anymore. Because even in death, Taral had taught him what it truly meant to be human, to care, to fight, and to never give up. He looked up at the stars, voice shaking. Someone better find us soon. Before I lose him completely? Outside, the beacon kept flashing, a message of hope, sent by two souls who were never meant to meet. Yet somehow had changed each other for Eve. The night stretched endlessly. The cold air bit into James's skin, and the silence was heavy, too heavy. The only sound was the soft hum of the beacon still pulsing in the snow. Its faint green light blinked like a heartbeat, a reminder that hope was still alive. James sat beside Taral's still form, his back against the cave wall. The alien looked peaceful now, almost asleep. His huge frame was still, his armor dim. James had wrapped the alien's upper body in what remained of the thermal blanket, though he knew it couldn't bring warmth anymore. He did it anyway, because it felt wrong to leave him uncovered. He spoke softly, voice cracking. You said your purpose was me, but I think you were wrong, Taral. Your purpose was bigger than that. You showed me what real strength is. The beacon beeped faintly again, reminding him to check the power. He glanced at it. The signal was still transmitting, though weaker now. Come on, he whispered. Just a little longer. Someone has to hear it. The hours passed slowly. James's body trembled with exhaustion, but he refused to sleep. His hands were numb, his lips dry, but his eyes stayed fixed on the beacon's light. Every blink of green felt like Taral's heartbeat, the rhythm of their shared fight for survival. Then, just before dawn, he saw it. A flash of light across the horizon. At first he thought it was his imagination, another illusion born from fatigue. But the flash came again, brighter this time. A slow, sweeping beam cut through the sky. James's heart raced. No way! He stumbled to his feet, waving his arms wildly. Hey, down here! I'm here! The light turned, focused on his location. Seconds later, he heard the deep hum of engines echoing across the valley. A ship, small, fast, and descending through the clouds. The snow whipped around as it neared the ground. James fell to his knees in relief. You did it, Tyrell, he whispered, glancing at the alien beside him. They heard us. The rescue shuttle landed with a hiss, the doors opening as two humans in thick suits ran out. One of them shouted, "Survivor located! We got your signal!" James tried to stand, but his legs gave out. The rescuers reached him, helping him up and wrapping a thermal coat around him. His voice was weak but urgent. Help him first. The alien. The rescuers exchanged uncertain looks. One stepped closer to Tyrell, scanning him with a handheld device. He's not human, the rescuer said quietly. I know, James said, gripping the man's arm. But he saved me. You save him too. The rescuer hesitated, then nodded. We'll try. They lifted Tyrell carefully onto a stretcher, covering his massive body with emergency wraps. As the team carried them both onto the ship, James felt his eyes blur with tears. He looked out the window as they lifted off, the cave shrinking below, the frozen valley disappearing beneath clouds. Inside the ship, the warmth returned slowly. Machines hummed softly. A medic pressed oxygen to James's face, checking his vitals. But James's gaze stayed on the other side of the cabin, where Tyrell lay still, surrounded by blinking monitors. The medic shook her head slightly. I don't know if he'll make it. His biology is very different. James's voice trembled. He gave me his life to send that signal. You have to try. The medic looked at him for a moment, then nodded. We'll do everything we can. Hours later, as the ship neared the orbiting station, James sat quietly beside Tyrell's stretcher. He reached out and held the alien's cold, giant hand in both of his. You kept me alive when I had nothing left, he whispered. Now it's my turn to keep you alive. As the ship docked, a soft alarm beeped. The alien's vitals flickered on the screen. A faint pulse. Weak, but there. James gasped, leaning closer. Come on, big guy. You're not done yet, the monitors steadied. One of the medics smiled faintly. He's responding. James closed his eyes in relief. Tears rolled down his face, but this time they were tears of joy. Days passed aboard the station. James healed quickly, though his thoughts often drifted to the medical bay where Tyrell was kept. The doctors worked endlessly to stabilize the alien's condition, and then, one quiet morning, a nurse called him. He's awake. James rushed into the room. Tyrell lay there, weak but breathing, his silver eyes half open. When he saw James, his voice came out low and soft. Signal worked. James laughed through his tears. Yeah, we made it. The alien's lips curved faintly. You are safe. So are you, James said, gripping his hand. And when we get home, everyone will know who you were. The alien who saved a human and taught him what friendship really means. Tyrell blinked slowly, his glowing eyes reflecting the light above. Then maybe, my purpose still continues, James smiled. Yeah, together. Outside the station window, Earth slowly came into view, blue, alive, and beautiful. Two survivors, two different worlds, but one story of courage, sacrifice, and something far stronger than fear. The galaxy would remember the day a human and an alien fought the cold together, and proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons or technology. It was the heart that refused to stop hoping,